It is I, Thomas Rousel, aka Survive the Jive. I'm back again for another Jive stream, and this time I'm going to talk about the new documentary film that was released today. My new film. It's called In Search of the Earth Mother Goddess of Anatolia, and I filmed it in September, October, so it's fresh off the press. I expect some people had some questions about it. It was a lot of work, so I thought, why not do a stream about it? I talk about anything you like to do with the film, like my research, what I learned, where I went, how I travelled about, the music, the editing, whatever you like. Any of the esoteric stuff that I didn't talk about. I will also, I'd like to say something. Basically, I'm going to only do half an hour of this, and then afterwards I'll continue the stream, and it may go in other directions, but only for patrons, because I have changed the way I do my patron charging now, and instead of charging per video, I charge per month. So that means that my earnings have just been cut by 2/3. So I need to get more patrons, or I'm in trouble. So but basically I think it's better that way, because then I can just spend more time doing higher quality videos instead of just making videos for the sake of it, because I get paid per video. Instead I can spend more time doing really good ones that more people like anyway, like the Aryan invasion one, and I got a couple of ones like that still in the works. The Celtic, about origins of the Celts, and another one about the Tokharians and the white mummies in China. So those will both take a long time. I have, so basically I have a couple of questions. I think I can check on Patreon first, because I said I'd answer Patreon questions about this film before any others. But I haven't got any through, so let me know what you'd like, if you have any comments about the film, what you'd like to know. I was in Turkey for 10 days, and it was sort of my holiday. It was my wife's holiday, but I was working the whole time. And I was also using it a little bit of time to have some fun swimming in the sea and things like that. So I put those clips in the video as well. But it was dashing about on a scooter trying to get to these different places. Someone asks, Matthew Randolph, did you see the Mount Chimera events in Lycia? No, I didn't. That was too much driving around as it was, and I knew about the Mount Chimera events. And a very interesting theory that basically the Chimera monster is actually a naturalistic interpretation, is that it's actually a mountain, because there's a mountain they call Chimera Mountain, on which they say there used to be lions in the middle, lions at the top, and goats in the middle, and snakes around the bottom. So the mountain was like the Chimera. And then the fire-breathing aspect of the Chimera is explained by the fact that this mountain in eastern Lycia actually belches out flames. And that's what this user was just asking whether I went to see. I would like to go there. If you climb up, you can find there's holes in the side of the mountain from which flames burst out, which sounds pretty cool, really. It's like methane that's constantly alit, basically. So it could have been like, Bellerophon was just sent to go and kill a lion on Chimera, and then by killing the lions on Chimera, he conquered Chimera and therefore made it safe for people to live there and, have their goats going on the mountain, because the goat farmers in Turkey, and as they do today, have to go up into the mountains, and there's no lions there now, but it probably would have been a bit of a pain in the arse when there's lions all over it. So that is a theory. But I don't think they have any proof that mountain was called Chimera in those days, so maybe it's not really true. And there's no contemporary evidence saying that it was a mountain. Satan Asker says the ancient Hellenes, Greeks, brought the patriarchy in Greece. That's absurd, I'm afraid. I don't think anything except patriarchy has ever existed. That when I said in the documentary it was more patriarchal than else, maybe. I don't even think the Neolithic pre-Indo-European Anatolians weren't matriarchal. I think there was always patriarchy everywhere, always. Never has been a proper, what's technically called matriarchy. And then when the Indo-Europeans came, it was more patriarchal So the Anatolian cultures, like the Hittites, are patriarchal. They're certainly not matriarchal. The Lycians were patriarchal. They had matronomics, but they were patriarchal. And then to say that the Hellenes brought patriarchy is just not correct, I'm afraid. There was already a patriarchy, but they just had a different attitude to women. Maybe women had less. Well, I don't think even that the Greeks, when they came Hellenized that region of Lycia, that they even altered the position of women in Lycia. They didn't do that much to change that. And also the same user says the pre-existing Pelasgians of Greece were matriarchal. Can't say for sure, but I doubt it. A lot of this stuff comes from Maria Gimbutas, who said that the old Europeans were matriarchal and peace-loving, but like it's not true. Everywhere we look, we find evidence that it's not true. In the distribution of male haplogroups, it shows male dominance in pre-Indo-European Europe. In the evidence of like people, completely filled with arrows, showing that there've been a major skirmish, like large groups of men firing arrows at a location at the same time, so like massive piles of arrows. So with stone-headed flints. I'm talking about in Britain, by the way, now, not in Turkey. So it just shows that the idea that the Indo-Europeans brought patriarchy anywhere is absurd. There was always patriarchy everywhere. What I say is that they might have been more patriarchal, which is if there's degrees of patriarchy, then I would say the Indo-Europeans were more patriarchal, and that could be correct. All we can say with absolute certainty is that the Indo-Europeans were very patriarchal. Anatolian. Were the Greeks whiter in the ancient days? Achilles is described as being blonde, etc., but I've recently heard that their genetic makeup has not changed much. Seems counterintuitive. That's a good question, but actually it's possible for both things to be true at the same time. Basically, think of it like this. A blonde person from Scotland is genetically the same as a black-haired person from Scotland, pretty much. A black-haired person from Germany is not closer to a black-haired Scot than a blonde-haired Scot. And a blonde-haired Swede is not closer to a blonde-haired Scot than a black-haired Scot is. Hair colour and things like that, these phenotypes, don't constitute an enormous amount of the genome. So the overall genetic makeup of a people can be very much the same, but the phenotypes can change. Let's say, for example, that a population had ginger people but decided gingers were gross and no one started breeding with the ginger people. It wouldn't take very long before there were no gingers left in that population. But the elimination of gingers from their gene pool would not constitute a genetic shift. It wouldn't make a change. So it's possible that the ancient Greeks looked different than modern Greeks, but they were the same genetically in genetic terms. So people who assume that the presence of more blondes in ancient times would mean that therefore that they were Nordic in a genetic sense, that's not necessarily true. They could have been more blonde whilst also being pretty much the same genetically as modern Greeks. There are Greeks today who are blonde. Blondism hasn't been eliminated in Greece, it's still a thing. And those people aren't genetically Nordic at all. They're genetically Greek, they just happen to be blonde. So that's important to understand, that phenotype isn't the same as genetic makeup. Hope that helps to answer your question. But does the camera angle hurt my neck? No, not at all. No. Last stream, someone complained about me drinking beer. They said it was a devil's juice. I don't care. Last night, I'll tell you something. While no one has any questions about the film, I'll just ignore you. Last night, I went to a little village here in Devon called Shebia, which is spelt she-bear. Don't tell Varg's wife. But anyway, that is that place is basically famous for what they do last night on the 5th of November. They have a stone that's been there. It doesn't belong there. It's a massive stone, weighs a ton, but it doesn't come from there. No one knows how it got there. Maybe been there since the Stone Age, who knows. But we know that probably since Saxon times, they've had a weird tradition where on that night, once a year, they have to flip the stone over, the strong men in the village. And I went there and interviewed some people about that and filmed the stone being flipped over, and even interviewed a priest about what they think, why they think it's been done. So look out for the video in future. I will do that as well. It'll go in my British folklore playlist. I have a folk customs of the British Isles playlist of those videos that I make. I know not everybody likes them. They don't do so well, those videos, but I think that it's important that somebody documents the traditional culture and customs of the British Isles, and I think is good. I think I feel proud of that work, even though I realise that most of my viewers aren't actually into that content. So I'm doing it because I feel a sense of responsibility as that it has to be done. Love the beer, brother. Okay, Double Dog, not representing Garapi. It's a funny name. This guy often comments, and he's gratefully left me $5. Thank you. And asks, do you know much about the connection between the Philistines, between modern Egypt and Israel, and the Mycenaean Greek predecessors? I know a bit. I haven't studied Philistine culture, but I was aware that the Philistines in the Bible were Indo-Europeans, and that the Philistines would have spoken an Indo-European language. But then more recently, I heard the DNA studies on Philistines and found it to be an interesting and revealing study. I think everyone did. Basically, it found that the Philistines were a European people who moved to the Levant and very quickly interbred with the people there. But they interbred with the people there without becoming the people there. Instead, the native Levantines who interbred with these Philistine European incomers were then, they formed a new community known as the Philistines. So the Philistine race, as it was known in the Levant, would be very similar genetically to what we now think of Ashkenazi Jews being, because Ashkenazi Jews today are a mixture of native Levantine and European people. So that means, so you could imagine that the Philistines were quite a bit like Jews in a genetic makeup sense. Ashkenazi Jews, I mean. What it shows is that like ethnicity is different maybe to how we think it. Like they didn't think of things in terms of purity. Probably the Philistine men who went there, if they took a native Canaanite or Hebrew woman, that woman ceased to be a Hebrew or Canaanite and their children were Philistines as far as the people around them came. So and as long as they spoke Philistine, then the Hebrews would dislike them and see them as another. So they became, even though they might have had plenty of Hebrew blood or Canaanite blood, they weren't viewed as ethnic brothers by the Semitic peoples around them anymore as soon as they started to interbreed with the Philistine incomers. So that's quite interesting. But what were the Philistine incomers like prior to the interbreeding with Levantines? It seems that there was something similar to Mycenaeans. So there was something like Greeks. So they may have come, in fact, the Philistines may have been very similar to Lycians, in fact. So because that whole region of, the southeast corner of Europe and Lycia would have been similar genetically. So a bit of Indo-European blood, but most of their blood comes from the Anatolian Neolithic farmers. So when we say European, like that is what we're associating it a lot with. European is either Anatolian Neolithic farmer or Indo-European blood, or a mixture of the two. The Levantines don't have that very much Anatolian farmer blood because the Levantine hunter-gatherers invented farming themselves. So the Anatolian, I said in a previous video that the Levantines migrated to Anatolia and took farming there, and then the Anatolians migrated to Europe. That was wrong. Subsequently, since that video was made, we've learned that Anatolian hunter-gatherers learned farming themselves. They didn't learn it from, or if they did learn it from the Levantine hunter-gatherers, then they didn't interbreed with them. There is a separate group called AHG now, Anatolian hunter-gatherer, and that is what they're the ones who learned farming in Anatolia and then came into Europe. There was no Levantine hunter-gatherers going into Europe at all. Bon Seraphin, $5 donation. Thank you. Did you read the study on the Anatolians hunter-gatherer? Oh, well, I guess you sent that before I just said what I said, so I preemptively answered that super chat question. Yes, I did. someone says most Turks are genetically native Anatolian and Greek. What's the difference? Because Greeks almost are entirely native Anatolian. So when you say native Anatolian and Greek, that's the same ethnicity. The ancient pre-Indo-European Greeks were entirely, the Pelasgians were genetically the same as Anatolians. They're like Anatolians who moved into Greece in the Neolithic, and then that is a Neolithic as well, the Pelasgian time. So they're still pretty much Anatolian, and whatever language they spoke there was probably intelligible by people in Anatolia. But the difference is that they got in the European blood a bit later from the Proto-Greeks coming in from the north, and that Mycenaeans have that, whereas the Minoans don't, for example. But anyway, Turks today do have a lot of Anatolian blood, but they also have Middle Eastern blood, and they also have Asian blood from the Turks themselves, the Turkic invaders from medieval times. So what is your opinion on Turkification? Should the Turks return to their ancestral roots? Well, which ones? Were they a mixture of three things? It's their country. They took. I believe in the right of conquest. They took it. It's theirs. It's their country. I don't have that. Nate the Ape, $2. Great work on the documentary. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, Nate. Much appreciated. Much appreciated indeed. Satan Askan says, I saw the map on Wikipedia that the Sea People invaded Palestine from Greece. Well, it's a guess because we don't know for sure, but it's quite likely, yeah, from Greece. Pirates, Indo-European pirates. Double Dog now again $10 donation and says, the last I heard, the Sea People that brought the Bronze Age to a bloody end were an unknown people. Your documentary appeared to present a confident identification of those people, correct? No, not a confident identification of all of them. The Sea Peoples are widely agreed not to be one people. It's meant to be a series of invasions of different people from the northern Mediterranean into what is widely agreed is that the Lycians were one of them, because Lycia, it's the right place, it's the right time, it's the right name. You got a triple whammy there. I mean, you could probably still argue that that's not enough evidence, but I think that I'm not saying it was just the Lycians. There's probably a mixture of Philistines, Lycians, Greeks. I don't know. Lots of things. Probably they're all going to be coming from somewhere around the Med and going into the other side of the Med, basically. Athelstan Saxton, £6. Thanks, Athelstan. Pro Beery live streams and love the film. Thanks. It's not like I get drunk or anything. I literally I drink a pint over the course of an hour. Hardly getting drunk. It's because I haven't had my supper and it's just keep me from getting too hungry. Impressed by the huge amount of research that went into it. How do you go about preparing for them? Well, first thing I do is do preliminary research and location scouting, like online. So I decide which locations I'm going to shoot at and what kind of research can string together locations to make a story. So, and I look at like what's interesting and new, and also what's established, and try and bring in like some like recent stuff into it. Also have a look at what other films other people have made, so I make sure I'm not going over stuff that other people have already done. So I have something unique about my film. Then I go there and do filming, obviously, and have to pivot because nothing goes exactly to plan in filmmaking. And then after after filming it and before post begins, there's a secondary level of research, because then I need to do more research to. Usually, I found out more stuff when I'm there, and I need to find out I need to learn more about those things I've just discovered when I was out on the field, and then that adds to the preliminary research, and then I can start editing. So quite a lot of research goes into it. If I earned a certain amount of, at the moment now I haven't even got enough to earn minimum wage in England now, so I've fallen quite a lot by switching my payment thing to monthly instead of by video. So it's pie in the sky now, but I'd like one day to be able to hire a researcher, because I used to work as a researcher for other people, for journalists, like people who work for The Guardian and stuff. So they don't do their own research. They have an intern or someone who they say, research knife crime. I've got to have the article ready for tomorrow morning. They don't even look for the fact or something. They've got someone else who just gives them all the facts on a piece of paper, and then they can string the article together. Easy when you've got assistants like that. But when you have to do all the research, everything yourself, it gets a bit difficult, especially when people only see some of the work. But I'd love to be able to hire people and have make Survive the Jive a proper company with employees, hire a cameraman to help me. My wife struggled with you see some of the shots got a bit wobbly because my wife isn't strong enough to hold the camera. But that is, yeah. So CH gives me £5, £4.99. I don't know why you didn't just do £5. Not I'm complaining, but how much of the Carthaginian genetic makeup was left in Europe after the Roman conquest? Was their society matriarchal? I've never studied the Carthaginians, but I know they're Semitic, and I've never heard of a matriarchal Semitic society. And as I said earlier, I don't think there ever has been a really matriarchal society. I don't believe in matriarchy as a thing that existed. I think, yeah, I just don't. I don't know anything about Carthaginians. I certainly don't think there's any Carthaginian genetic makeup in Europe, really. Because the Carthaginians didn't conquer Europe. It's the Romans who conquered Carthage. So I don't see that they would leave a significant amount of genes behind. But I imagine their genes would be quite similar to North African genes anyway. So it would be very difficult to distinguish whether North African genes arrived in Italy, for example, during Carthaginian times or during the whether from Berberi Arabs or whatever, during the medieval times. So, but yeah, there are trace amounts of North African and aka Middle Eastern DNA in parts of southern Europe, including Spain and Sicily and Greece. Gua, what is this documentary everyone is talking about? Is it the matriarchal goddess one? Yes, hence the title of the stream, Gua, Anatolian Earth Mother Documentary AMA. So this is an AMA about the documentary that came out this morning. Put it on your watch later list and make sure you watch it, please. Jonathan Waller gives me £2.99. Was a fantastic documentary. What's planned next? Or you must have missed the beginning of the stream. I said the next thing's planned is I got an in the field video about the turning of the Devil Stone in Shebia, which I filmed last night, and that is going to go in my folk customs of the British Isles playlist. If you're not aware of that, have a look at my playlists. And then I've got some more like DNA history videos coming. The first one will be where did the Celts come from? Controversial, but I'll just present the evidence and you can see for yourself what you think. And the other one will be about Tokharians, white mummies in China, the Tarim Basin mummies basically. And that one I've had planned for a long time because I know it will be popular because it's the sort of video that will be popular, and I want to do it, but I want to do it good. Other people can make like lame videos about it where they just sort of, say stuff that isn't proven, but I want to get all the DNA evidence. Keep it fact based, and not get silly over it. Spoiler alert: I don't think the mummies are Tokharians. Do you know whether Indo-Europeans reached Egypt? Heard some Egyptians had blonde hair and R1B. Not really relevant to the film, but I did mention Egyptians, so I'll let you off. They didn't speak Indo-European in Egypt, except the Greeks and the Romans did. So yes, Greeks and Romans were both Indo-European speakers, so they got there. Whether R1B was brought by them, I don't know. I know that some pharaohs had R1B, but that could have been brought via... there are Semitic peoples who can have... It doesn't have to be an Indo-European going directly. It doesn't have to be a Yamnai going directly into... or a Belbeaker person going directly into Egypt. It can be their haplogroups can travel along from other intermediary populations. Could be the Hyksos, could be Hittites. I don't know, but there was not an analysis. Genome-wide analysis of many mummies has proven that genetically they're not Europeans. They don't have lots of Europeans' DNA. They're just Middle Eastern-like people. Basically, that's what you'd expect of Egyptians. I don't know why people insist on saying they're white or black, because they're not black and they're not white. There were some black people in ancient Egypt. There were some white people in ancient Egypt, but for the most part, Egyptians were Egyptian, which means Middle Eastern. So just think of it like that. Thanks for your fantastic work. Next pint's on me. Thanks, CH. Cheers, CH, for that. Oh, it's going a bit faster now. Genetically, Lycians were similar to which population? Bon Seraphim says, with a €5 donation. Thank you. Well, I don't know, because I've not seen any Lycian DNA. I'm going to assume that the Lycian peasants who would have less Indo-European DNA than the aristocracy. That's a basic, that's based not on any direct evidence in Lycia, but on the way that we see the transfer. When you have a transfer of a new language, it's usually mediated by elites. Then you have more of the DNA of the people who brought the language among elites and among peasants. And that's quite consistent everywhere you go, from ancient Greece to ancient India, even like in more modern times, like in Mexico or whatever. You know, the elites have more Spanish blood than the peasants in Mexico. That's just, and they speak Spanish in Mexico. That's how it works. That is not set in stone, but that's just a trend that you can generally see. So it would be reasonable to assume the Lycians elites had more Indo-European DNA, but all the rest just had generally normal Anatolian farmer DNA, which is very similar to that of modern Sardinians. So you could imagine them to be somewhat like modern Greeks and Sardinians in Lycia. I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop quite soon and continue the stream in the Patreon for patrons only. So if you sign up as a patron on Subscribestar or on Patreon, you can then access the rest of the stream and much other exclusive content, special streams I've done on all kinds of subjects. I'll answer these last questions quickly. Double Dog. This mother goddess was featured in the movie 13th Warrior and seems to be associated with Neanderthal. Was that artistic liberty to your knowledge? That's completely fictional film written by a book by Michael Crichton, and it has as much fact in it as his other book, Jurassic Park. So there are no dinosaur islands and there are no Neanderthal goddesses or anything. So it's just a book. It's just a fun story. So with that, I thank you all, and I'll see the good old boys, the real Indo-European supporters who helped this channel to exist, or it wouldn't exist, in the continuing stream now. If you click on the link that's on the page I sent out on Patreon earlier, the stream will continue there. Okay, everyone, thanks for watching.